This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 86. Paul Shapiro. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 86 of Experts on the Wire. I've been doing SEO since I used it to grow my own music business back in 2007. And then in 2009, I built 2 e-commerce websites by hand and used SEO again to help grow those sites. For context, this is just before the iPhone even came out. So for some of you, you might not even remember life before the iPhone or smartphones. But fast forward to today, that's where I've been doing SEO for some well-known brands, some big companies. Sometimes I catch myself sitting back and thinking, well, what is there more to know about SEO? I got this. I've been doing it like 10 years. I'm comfortable. I know what I'm doing. But then I see posts and slide decks out there on the web of someone like my guest today, Paul Shapiro. The crushing reality sets in. I have a ton more I could learn. So my goal is to learn everything I can with Paul today on the show and thus share that with you. We're going to chat about ranking factors, automating keyword research, link building, and a ton more. But first, I should mention our sponsor, BuzzSumo, a tool that keeps making me look like a hero when I show it to clients and use it for research and strategy. And I'll tell you more about them later. But first, Paul, welcome. How are you?
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me. This is awesome. Been listening for a while now.
Oh, great to hear you're a listener. I love hearing when guests are actually listeners to the show. So let's start with a little bit of your background. So, Paul, you're at a company called Catalyst now. Can you just kind of briefly explain what Catalyst is and what your role is there?
Yeah, sure. So Catalyst is a search and social agency servicing mostly Fortune 500 clients. We're a part of Group M, which is obviously the larger media buying arm of one of our WPP parent companies. But we focus on search and social. And in terms of myself, my title is the Director of Strategy and Innovation here at Catalyst. And I more or less focus on bringing new technologies, new techniques, and making sure that our clients get the latest and greatest when it comes to the SEO and as well as our other offerings in paid search and social.
And I saw on your LinkedIn, I know yourself and Catalyst has a really impressive list of clients and companies you've worked with. Are you able to name a few of kind of the big corporate clients that you have or currently work with?
Yeah, so we worked with Proctor and Gamble for a while, worked on some very interesting clients with them, Olay, CoverGirl, a number of very, very feminine focused products like Tampax and Always, pads, which was a very interesting website to work on. Worked with on Volkswagen and a number of other very, very large clients for a while as well.
That's great. We're going to chat about kind of what it's like working with big clients in just a moment. But first, you're involved in many other things. Can you just kind of give a brief list that we'll go into more detail later on? What are some of the other things that you're involved with?
Most recently, along with Catalyst, we just put on a conference here in Boston, focused specifically and only devoted to technical SEO. It was a little bit of a passion project of mine, and I think it was an incredible event. We had some amazing speakers from all over, and the live stream was made available to everyone, so you can still watch that if you're interested in checking out the content from that conference today for free. In terms of other things online, I am one of the people who runs our big SEO community on Reddit. We're almost 20,000 people strong. We try to be a little bit more focused on advanced and experienced SEO than the other competing subreddit RSEO. And we do some nice things like AMAs every now and then.
That's excellent. So one thing I was just wondering, and maybe some of the listeners out there who might be striving to work in an agency one day and work with big clients, in like a minute or two, paint the picture of like, what's the day in the life of Paul Shapiro look like?
Just like everyone else, client's the boss. So I need to cater to their needs and help them to grow their business. So it's whatever's going on with them in this week, month, quarter, year. And doing things to help coordinate with that and our larger SEO team, which takes care of, standard SEO practices such as like keyword research and tech audits and whatnot. So I'm working to sort of enhance what they're doing, make it better and bigger and more shiny and awesome. As well as, I focus a lot on, building our brand to some extent, with sharing some of that information out with what I'm doing. So I read an awful lot. I have an RSS reader. I think there's something like 300 blogs in that RSS reader. And I'm pretty actively read them, just to stay on top of things. And then it's, I do a process of also coming up with ideas every day. I use Trello, and I have this sort of interesting setup. If people are unfamiliar with Trello, things are sort of divided into distinct boards, and you can move items in between those boards. So what I do is I have this big board devoted to general ideas. And then what I do is I keep loading ideas in there every day, and then I move them back into the two other boards, which are good ideas, once I've determined that an idea is like actually worth pursuing. And then I have the bad idea graveyard. When I look back on some of the ideas I came up with, I determined they weren't so good. So just having this whole process of coming up with ideas every day, and looking back on them and reviewing them before I actually pursue them, I think is sort of huge to my workflow and what I do every day.
On your LinkedIn profile, you have an endorsement from someone, and it's a glowing endorsement. And in it, he says that you have the ability to win respect in a room full of, quote, hostile individuals and earn trust. I'm sure that maybe hostile is a little hyperbolic, but the gist of this review, an endorsement on LinkedIn, was that you seem to be able to unite people and get them to agree and maybe decide to be doing SEO at all, or kind of sell SEO or whatever it is that you're selling. So talk about that a moment. When you're sitting in a room with big clients, with people that have differing opinions, different roles, different, goals, how do you get them to kind of unite and earn their trust?
Yeah, I mean, SEO specifically is a tough one. You're coming into this world where there are a lot of conflicting opinions and conflicting ideas about, how we should be prioritizing these things in the larger business. Also, there's a lot of issues around, explaining a concept in depth, or sort of not dumbing it down, but simplifying concepts depending on who you're speaking to in order to help them best understand it. So I think sort of just realizing that SEO isn't the easiest thing for everyone, and it very much varies in understanding from group to group, and that there are points of contention really sort of helps to drive the conversation. And you need to be thinking about it in sort of a flexible manner to help sort of mitigate those things.
Going a little deeper, we have a question from Matt Lacusta, if I'm saying his name correctly, at MATTLACUESTA on Twitter, says, question, as someone in a larger organization, how do you ensure organic search is integrated into each relevant part of the business? How do you act as a change agent, integrator, and silo destroyer?
That's a fantastic question. I think it's a matter of finding all those points where you can help, the other departments, help the other parts of the business, and sort of demonstrate those points where you can provide those values. For paid search, for instance, there are clear opportunities there. The SEO is sort of like the master of the website. In some ways, they understand what's going on there. So just sort of communicating those things. There's a lot of synergies that can happen in terms of data there, and making sure those are clearly defined, some sort of like integrated reporting, but also in terms of strategy, makes a whole lot of sense. And applying that same sort of logic to other business units, such as just if you're looking at display advertising, there's a whole lot of data that SEO and search can provide there. Just if you look at something like Google Trends is a very, very basic example. You can sort of see what people are concerned with, not just day by day, but it breaks it down much more granularly now. And sort of being someone that says, here, I have these insights into what our consumers are looking at, and making sure that these things are going to be ever communicated to those different departments really does provide a lot of value in itself.
So we're going to talk about some technical marketing things in just a moment. But first, I want to ask you, Paul, and it lists right on your LinkedIn profile, you call yourself a technical marketer. What does being a technical marketer mean to you?
My background is in SEO, but it's also in web design and development. And that's something I've brought to my SEO practice and use every day. Sort of those programming skills and the understanding of how the web works. Mm-hmm. And that's not isolated to SEO as well. We sort of look at this sort of Venn diagram of different, marketing channels and how they all interconnect with one another. And I think very much at the center of that, you can apply technical skills in many ways. And that's what it means to me, is applying technical skills, across marketing. So
we're going to get technical now. On Twitter, both Corey Eulis, who's been a guest on the show, and a guy by the name of Joe Kelly, he's at KELLYJW514 on Twitter. Corey said he wants to know about, and Paul, you're going to have to help me out here, but KNIME, which I don't know if it's an acronym or a word. And then Joe wants to know about that as well. So, Paul, can you describe what this is? Tell me how to pronounce it, if so, yeah. and what this is and what it's used for.
Yes, it is an acronym. It's pronounced NIME, though.
Okay.
NIME. And it is a tool that I use in sort of every facet of my work nowadays. And it's not an SEO tool. It's originally used for bioinformatics. So people studying, genetic sequences and whatnot.
And is this a tool for Mac, for PC? Can you just go somewhere and download it?
Yeah. It's completely open source, and it's compatible with every operating system: Linux, Windows, Mac OS. So really runs the gamut.
So it's a tool it sounds like a tool you can use for whatever purpose you might want to use it for, but you have an interesting application. I dug up a post called Semantic Keyword Research with NIME and Social Media Data Mining. I assume this is one use, or maybe you have others. Can you describe some ways that SEOs can use this tool?
Yeah. So maybe it would be helpful if I sort of explained a little bit more what the tool is, and then I could go into some basic applications of it. So the basic concept, they call it like a data analytics program. But what it really is a visual programming language with lots of integrations for reading and writing data. So everything is broken down into this concept of a node, and they are drag and drop. You can drag a node right into sort of a workspace, and then you connect the different nodes to each other. Each one of these nodes accomplishes a very singular and specific task. And when you sort of combine them together, they do great things. And that's very much how computer programming works in general. But this sort of breaks it down in a way that's very accessible. And there's a lot of code already written for you to do things very quickly and efficiently. So I gave this presentation, I believe it was in 2015, out in Brighton SEO, about how you can use NIME for semantic keyword research. And the basic idea was we pulled a lot of data together. It came from various sources. We had Google Search Console and Google Trends and AdWords and social media, and we sort of used this to analyze it semantically. So we were looking at some sort of very, very basic natural language processing sort of concepts that were being analyzed there, but stuff that's very, very useful to an SEO at the end of the day, just to have in their wheelhouse.
And so I'm going to link to this post in the show notes because you have a lot of visuals and it goes very in depth. Can you sort of explain one example or scenario of like what maybe strategically or something you can accomplish with this tool? I'm seeing some examples here, but this is definitely a little technically intense. So What's sort of like an end result that you might get from this tool, or something that we can use to apply this to our SEO or marketing?
Yeah, sure. So say you were writing a web page about, pick a topic that's very close to home for me, horror movies, or we'll get more specific, Night of the Living Dead.
Mm-hmm.
If you were writing a page about Night of the Living Dead, and you wanted that to be a very comprehensive web page on that topic, that wasn't just about the keyword Night of the Living Dead, but you were sort of incorporating, relating concepts and other terms to make that like a fully fleshed out page on that topic.
Mm-hmm.
You could use this to sort of extract keywords and ideas to sort of enhance that post. And by doing that, you're sort of helping the search engine understand the concept better,
mm-hmm.
which can help in a myriad of ways. I don't want to go as far to say that it will definitely improve rank, but it could potentially help there. One thing it will definitely do is help you sort of improve the breadth of keywords that you can appear for.
Yeah, it's very similar to, like, I think the example Google might give, or maybe it was Bill Slosky, that if you're writing about New York City, you should mention Manhattan, Brooklyn, Statue of Liberty, Empire State Building, right? You're mentioning kind of related concepts, very much like thinking of entities.
Right.
So I'm going to link to that in the show notes. That sounds very useful. I'm curious, Paul, because one thing I mentioned at the very beginning was myself sometimes feeling complacent with SEO. I'm always wanting to push myself to learn more. How did you come across this tool, Nime? Did you already know about it? Like, were you looking for other ways to process data? Like, how did you even find this tool?
Yeah. So in this case, that answer is very simple. This came from my boss at the time, Benjamin Spiegel, who was working with it with one of our clients. They were doing a lot of their analytics work in it. And he was the one to sort of bring this to me and say, Paul, this could have some really excellent applications. And I started playing with it, and I was dumbfounded. It was an amazing thing to add to my tool set, so much that it became my primary tool for doing absolutely everything SEO related down the line.
Wow. You have a great post about downloading Search Console data to keep a record of it, right? Because as of now, it goes away after 90 days. So talk a little bit about your method here, and I'm going to link to the post in the show notes, but describe for some of the listeners to maybe get them interested in checking out this post and doing this for themselves.
Yep. So we were just chatting a lot about Nime, but I'm certainly platform agnostic. I do a lot of coding in Python, use R a lot, other programming language as well, as part of my tool set. So in this case, Google Search Console opened up their API for downloading the search analytics data, all the keyword data, click data, and all those associated metrics with that. And I think I was either the first or one of the first to really leverage that API when it had been released. I was in the beta program for some time, so I was able to sort of like code that up when it became publicly available.
And this is like the same API that like Screaming Frog plugs into, right? If you want to crawl and grab Search Console data in your crawl as well, right?
Yep. Screaming Frog's using it nowadays. URL Profiler. I think most of the big platforms are leveraging it nowadays. So the script is pretty simple. It downloads all your keywords via the API and backs it up to a SQL database. Sort of every month. That way, instead of being limited to that 90 days, you have a backlog of all this keyword data over time.
And tell me a little bit about what you need for the SQL database. Is this something you can run locally? Is it better to have it, on a server somewhere? How does that look in terms of data storage?
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly run it locally if you'd like to do that. I guess the complications with doing that is, are you keeping your computer running at all times? And if you're not, you might sort of miss the scheduling there. I sort of advocate using like cron jobs to accomplish that, which is it's just what I was talking about. It's a scheduling system. So if your computer is not running at the time it was scheduled to run, it won't run. So if you're gonna not other than running it locally, I do advocate, running it on a server or in the cloud using something like AWS from Amazon or DigitalOcean or one of those other sort of server providers.
And then once you have this data sitting in your database, is it a matter of then do you bring it into NIME? Like what do you do with it once you have it sitting there?
Yeah, the world's your oyster there. I bring it. I mean, SQL is a very robust thing. You could sit there with a SQL client and sort of query it as you needed. NIME will certainly handle the connection to MySQL, and you can sort of pull that data in that way, or you can try to pull it into a third-party application.
Do you have a favorite SQL client?
For Windows, Heidi SQL is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
It's free and open source. I'm not sure if it runs on any other platforms. I don't think it does. It's been a while since I've used a Mac, so that would be my recommendation. If NIME is a decent SQL client as well.
One thing that occurs to me is, again, tying this back to working with big clients, I can imagine they must be very impressed when you have a backlog of all their Search Console data. Would you say that's one of like the biggest positives of having all of this data historically at your disposal, that it can really impress your clients?
I think it's certainly impressive, but with the type of clients we're working with, usually it's sometimes like it's a must-have. Like everyone's sort of started to do this, so it's maybe a little bit less of a wow factor, as in like this is something you need in your arsenal of data.
So it's table stakes now.
Yeah.
And I believe, Google keeps teasing this, that they're going to expand beyond the 90 days, but it hasn't happened yet.
I would love to see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the new Search Console looks amazing, and there's tons of useful things in there.
Yes.
I would love for them to roll that out to everyone. It's really, really game changer in my opinion.
Yeah. I got access to it on a few of the, 100 or so accounts that I have in my Webmaster Tool Search Console account.
Yeah. I especially like the indexation reports.
Yep.
I'd written a script and I posted this on Search Engine Land about how you could sort of like scrape Google to get indexation status of URLs using Python.
Yep.
And I got a little slap by Gary for that one.
They didn't like that, huh?
Yeah, they don't like that so much. But one of the reasons why I wrote that actually was to say like, hey, Google, like this is sort of our only option if we want indexation status right now. We would really love it if you sort of integrated that into the Search Console. And I don't know, I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily responsible for that, but like, I hope they listened, and it seemed like they did.
Yeah, they do seem to listen, which is good. So we're going to chat about one more kind of technical thing here, and then we're going to go into link building and ranking factors. You have another post that's really great. It's calculating keyword growth using Google Trends, Python, and the slope formula. I'll link to that, as well as your slides from your distilled Search Lab presentation. What is this post all about? Obviously, the title hints at that a little bit, but kind of break down what the utility of this post is.
Yeah. So this was another Python script. And the whole idea was I want to see if a keyword's growing in usage over time, specifically year over year. So how are you going to do that? Because you have all these individual data points. I can look at this like day by day, and then how am I going to assess individual year at all the time? So really at its most basic is I'm averaging current year and the year before, and I'm comparing it to each other to see if that keyword has grown over time or is it decreased in interest over time. So we can sort of look at these keywords in bulk and see, is this a keyword we want to sort of pursue, or is this on a decline and we shouldn't bother?
Yeah, I mean, I can intuit the really high usefulness of this, which I assume is, like you said, predicting what keywords are going to be increasing, which ones are decreasing. Are there any other uses for this sort of data that you find? And if not, that's okay. I'll skip by that. But just curious if there's something beyond that sort of intuitive thing as far as using this data.
Fortunately, I think it's very an intuitive concept. They just provided a simpler means of getting at that in bulk.
So for somebody like me who's not, into formulas, what is a slope formula?
If you have 2 points, each one has their own coordinate. So it has an X coordinate and has a Y coordinate. And that sort of dictates its position on the graph, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now that's 1 point, and now we have another point. And it's simply comparing its position on the graph to the other position on the graph.
Okay. I know there's 2 positions. So in this example, would those 2 positions be 2 keywords or the same keyword on 2 different dates?
Right. So it would be that index number that Google Trends provides for a certain date compared to the same value on a previous date.
Perfect. Okay, so you're looking at the change over time. That's great.
Right.
So again, I'll link to this in the show notes. I wanted to definitely share all these with the listeners, again, to really show that, if you're feeling like you haven't, you're kind of stuck in your SEO progress, like there's so much more to go learn. So definitely check out these posts. One more little quick question about this. We had a tweet from Joseph Robinson on Twitter. He wanted to know if you have any more automation ideas for SEO, Google Sheets, anything automation at all that we haven't covered yet.
Yeah, I'm certainly bullish on automating as much as possible. That way you could sort of get to some of the other stuff that can't be automated, client interaction, coming up with newer and greater ideas and focusing on things that sort of move the needle that can't be automated. So I think at the very base of what you should be automating, it should be reporting. There's no reason why reporting should be a manual process. You pull in a lot of data from Search Console and ranking trackers and your analytics, and you sort of can create something that's standardized for the most part. Now that doesn't necessarily include the insights that are associated with that data. I'm not advocating automating that. You definitely want a human being analyzing that afterward. But the actual like if you're creating a dashboard or a certain set report every month for your client, that certainly can be automated. And you can use something like we use Tableau a lot. That's just sort of a visualization software. It's a little pricey. There's Google Data Studio that's now free, or Microsoft has Power BI. Those are all, I think, more than acceptable options for accomplishing this.
Yeah, I'll link to an episode with Andy Cushing where we talked about dashboards a lot. It's quite a while ago, so it's in the archives, but I'll link to it. So Paul, we're going to chat link building, but first I have to mention my sponsor, BuzzSumo, but with a quick little story. So I was recently giving an in-house workshop at a media company. The goal at that workshop was to educate them about SEO and kind of get them fired up about it. It was kind of my first time going in-house there. I was trying everything to get them kind of excited about it. I was showing them keywords. I was finding things broken on their site, showing them results from past clients of mine. None of that worked at all. But then I opened up BuzzSumo. I entered their top competitor, and showed them all of their social shares, their links, who had been sharing their competitors' content. I immediately saw their emotions turn on, the light bulbs go off. And of course, with BuzzSumo, that only took me a few seconds to show them. So in that case, it was just a matter of unlocking the right door to get them fired up about SEO and get them kind of motivated. And for them, it was showing them how well their competitor was doing with certain things. And it only took a few seconds in BuzzSumo. So for all you listeners out there, if you want to try BuzzSumo, you can get 30% off 3 months with the code DANSHURE, DANSHURE. So you can go to buzzsumo.com to get 30% off 3 months with that code. I love BuzzSumo. Paul, do you use BuzzSumo at all? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, we love BuzzSumo, and they have an API. So that's something you can leverage for automating the kind of insights that you would normally pull out of BuzzSumo as well.
Oh, so all the stuff you just talked about, you can pull in BuzzSumo's data with that stuff.
Right into 9 if you wanted.
That's awesome. Great. So let's chat link building. I'm going to open up a little bit of an old post here, so I hope you don't mind me kind of going into the archives. But you have a post that received, I believe at the time, a lot of attention called Wake a Sleeping Giant for Content Marketing SEO Your Employees. That's the title. I believe the gist of this post is kind of leveraging all the people in a company to help accelerate or improve the link acquisition process. So I'm just really curious, Paul, to know, maybe give us a quick synopsis of this, but I would love to know more about maybe some tangible ways that myself or the listeners can put something like this into action, because I tell you, I feel like there's all these opportunities with some of the companies I've been working with. Some of it for me is just a matter of not knowing how to attack it or the priorities or where to begin. So I'd love for you, Paul, to kind of break this down and tell me and the listeners how they can think about link acquisition with employees.
Yeah. So first of all, anyone who's been involved in link building knows that outside of content strategy, one of the biggest problems is scale. And this isn't applicable to every company, but I was sort of enamored with this concept that was being widely used in social media with like tools like Gaggle Amp, where you sort of encourage your employees to sync up with this platform, and then every time there's a new post and whatnot, that automatically gets shared, sort of widening the net of your social influence there. Mm-hmm. So I said, why couldn't you do the same thing with like blogging and guest blogging and link building? So I wrote this post, and I sort of dictated how some companies could think about this, and how encouraging, incentivizing employees to do this with prizes or other means, a scoreboard could help sort of build content and links.
So what are some examples, and I see the heading here in this post, link building tactics to involve your team on. I think this is sort of the punchline myself and all the listeners would like to get to, is like, tell me what these opportunities are. So Paul, if you don't mind, can you describe what some of these tangible like ways that companies' teams can acquire links?
So if you're getting your employees to write a lot, then you can sort of use their bios and encourage them to sort of do some guest posting and reach out to some other websites to link to those posts, and then they get a link in your bio. It's sort of a very old school tactic, but when you sort of widen your net with your employees, that can work very, very well. You sort of can use your social media, your employees' social media presence to. This isn't sort of direct link building, but it's that sort of indirect link building that we talk about, where you sort of propagate your stuff throughout the web. That's why we have a correlation with social shares and links. This sort of indirectly gets your attention, which gets in the face of people that might write about it and might link to it.
There's two encourage them. Yep. There's two that stand out. They're a little off the path. They're a little outside of the box. So building partnerships to address broken links. What is that one all about?
Yeah, I mean, if you really wanted to, you can get your employees searching for these sort of opportunities. This is something that a normal like a link builder or an SEO might engage in. It's relatively easy to teach, and you can certainly give like a quick 15-minute training on how to do this across your employee network, and sort of teach them how to reclaim some of those broken links.
Yeah, the other one that jumps out is getting links from your customers. You have an interesting idea here. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is not it's not a new idea. You used to see it spammed a lot, where you would create a WordPress template, and then all of a sudden you'd have a million links that way. But on a more white hat approach, if you're sort of partnering, if you're a strong presence within some of your customers, sort of just ask them would you mind linking to us where appropriate? It helps us, and we love you guys. So
yeah, you mentioned having the sales team collecting information from customers, and so you were saying at the sales level, at that stage, having them inquire about linking to the company website.
Yeah, I mean, the sales team's usually the person that has that relationship. So I think that makes a whole lot of sense.
And then through all the, I'll link to the post. There's a few other ideas, but through all of this, you recommend having it be like a game with incentives, right? Do you find that this is something that's needed sometimes to motivate people to actually follow through with this?
Yeah, I think in large organizations with a lot of conflicting priorities, that's something that really helps. You need to encourage people to step outside whatever their primary activity is, and sort of making it a game really does aid that.
Let's chat for a moment about, there was a great question. You did an AMA on inbound a few years ago, and I'm going to open up this link here.
Oh my.
Yeah. There's a great question, and you have a great answer, and I'll be happy to read a few sentences to you, Paul, to jog your memory here. But I'd love to dive into this for a second. So Anuj Adia, who's actually has been on this podcast as well, he wanted to know about in the travel space, when you're working in a competitive industry, he says, like, you see TripAdvisor, Expedia, Lonely Planet, like it's super competitive. And he was curious about having ways, or if there's any ways to show up as a smaller site or a newer site, newer company, without the kind of resources that those big players have. And so if anything comes to mind now, it'd be great. If not, again, I'd be happy to kind of read your answer to you and the listeners to kind of jumpstart that. But it's kind of generally like, what do you do when you're in a space like that against so many companies that have millions and millions of dollars of resources?
Yeah. So this was a number of years ago, so I can only imagine what my response at the time was. But today, I think what my answer would be is you have a leg up on these larger companies in the sense that they're organizations that have their own bureaucracies and things that they have to overcome in order to implement anything on the SEO side. Some companies are better than this than others. I think companies like TripAdvisor move very, very fast. But a lot of times a small business can move even faster, especially if that's something that they focus on. So you have the ability just to move faster than them. Something else I'd probably leverage when you're dealing in a very, very competitive space is to not forget that SEO at the end of the day is something that should be tested. We have our own set of best practices that we tend to always sort of propagate in the SEO industry. But oftentimes some of the biggest wins come from testing things, testing new things, and seeing if that works. So you can sort of, I would sort of focus on maybe testing new ideas out, and seeing if you can get those to sort of beat your competitor that way.
I love that. The thing you mentioned in the AMA was collecting a ton of data on the competitors in the SERPs and trying to find holes, places they aren't ranking, and then build content off of that as a seed. So what I was curious about there was, how do you find the holes in your competitors' SEO?
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at content, that could be sort of analyzing the topics that they're talking about, and sort of, I would probably take all the very individual posts that they're writing about and sort of group those together and see if topically there are any holes there. You could do that in terms of topics, but you could also do it in terms of backlinks. Where are the sort of the backlinks sort of clustering together in terms of topics or otherwise in terms of pages, and sort of see, well, if they're playing really heavy here, and that's where they're focusing their efforts, and they're not focusing here elsewhere, then maybe by focusing elsewhere, then I can get a large traffic share that way.
I see. So you might try to find topic areas where they have less backlink activity as an indication of a hole.
I think that's certainly one place to start looking.
That's a really good strategy. That's something I need to do more, is looking at the backlinks and trying to kind of reverse engineer what the competitors are doing and not doing. I love that. Okay, so we're going to chat about ranking factors. And Paul, we're just going to dive straight in. SEMrush, they recently came out with a study. There was a lot of buzz, a lot of comments, a lot of discussion. Paul, did you see this study that SEMrush came out with?
I sure did.
Yeah.
And I certainly have comments on it like everyone else does.
Yeah. So I want to ask you directly right here on the podcast. You probably know what I'm going to ask. Direct traffic, is it a ranking factor?
No, I do not think it is a ranking factor.
Do you think that in this study, or even readers of the study, do you think we're kind of conflating what we even mean by direct traffic? So in other words, like, do you know, did SEMrush literally mean direct traffic is shown in analytics, which we know is not all really direct traffic? Are they talking about somebody literally going to the browser and typing in your domain? If they're doing that, how do they know? Like, what do you think they even mean by direct traffic?
I'm not even sure. I think actually,
and that's the problem with direct traffic, right? Is it sort of a black box?
Right. And even if you sort of break it down into what it could mean, I think there's a lot of issues. If you look at it in terms of just what you were seeing in analytics, or if they were using sort of clickstream data, I don't think that would certainly mean that it's a ranking factor. We're talking about correlation versus causation. And if you're getting a lot of traffic to a certain page or a certain website, of course there's going to be a strong correlation there with rankings. It's a very obvious correlation. I don't know if you've ever seen this. There's a website, Spurious Correlations, I believe.
I've seen that. Yes.
Yeah, it's great. So it'll take two completely random, unrelated things and will demonstrate a very strong correlation between the two.
Right.
It'll be like the number of nurses in Boston compared with the number,
how many chairs they sold in Cleveland.
Right.
Yeah. So we have a question from Twitter. It's from Gaetano NYC, GAETANO_NYC. He wants to know, have you seen a shift towards inbound links being less important as a ranking factor versus content quality, engagement, and on-page optimization?
I'm going to say that backlinks are probably still the most important thing that could influence a ranking. That being said, in the last several months or so, I've certainly seen rankings and search patterns jump around quite a bit. And what that probably is, if I had to guess, was the application of things like RankBrain and their use of machine learning to influence ranking factors. So they're essentially like changing the weighting of different rankings on a search by search level.
Yes.
So something that's important for one search may be slightly less important for another. So the end result is, I've seen on page be a little bit more important in some cases. But I think links are still king when it comes to SEO.
So I've seen that too lately in my rank trackers, that the rankings jump around way more than they used to. And oftentimes they are not as similar as results when I just go to Google and search, and even incognito. So is that what you think is happening? Is that just the rankings, query to query, person to person, are just fluctuating a lot more because of like RankBrain and machine learning?
Yeah, I mean, that would be my guess. Things aren't as simple as they once were. There are a series of factors and signals that Google is leveraging, and when you throw something in there like machine learning, it's a little bit more difficult to disseminate what the cause of that is.
And let's break down link building and links just for a second. I think this is a danger we all run into as SEOs, even when we call something SEO. Like, that's way too big and broad of a term. And when I see people have disagreements or arguments on Twitter or online, it's almost like one person could be talking about local SEO and the other person's talking about e-commerce SEO. And of course, things are different. So break down links. What types of links, what aspects of links are you seeing as the ones that are important and contributing to rankings?
The way I tend to approach link building is, it's very much content driven. You create content that people would want to link to. And then you do outreach. You look at some maybe larger publications, you approach it sort of like at a PR angle, you leverage some relationships. I'm going to want to link more than likely from the Wall Street Journal more than Joe Schmo's Blogspot website. And I don't think that my approach to link building has changed much over the years. I think that's still a very solid way of looking at that.
Yeah, I agree. And philosophically, and just how I go about doing SEO, I'm also not a huge link builder myself. But aside from actually building links, let's talk about like the factors of links. So I'll list like some that come to mind. So You might have link velocity, anchor text, where the link is on the page, linking root domains, all these various subset metrics within links. Are there any that you feel contribute more to rankings?
Yeah, I think making sure that you're getting linked to by a diverse set of authority links. So depending on what metric you use, like high domain authority, high page authority, but very topically relevant websites that tend to talk about a certain topic that more often that then link to you, which is also relevant to that topic. Mm-hmm. And making sure that's really diverse. So something that is from a different domain name versus one domain name that links to you a whole bunch of other times is probably a little bit more helpful on an individual link to link basis. Things, very traditionally talk about like different like IP addresses. That could also be something that, appears more powerful at the end of the day, but it's not something that I tend to focus on philosophically.
There's another ranking question here, and Paul, we might have to interpret this a little. It's from DevDawg, DEVDAWG on Twitter. He literally, so this is what the tweet says, ask him if he's noticed if anchor text usage in relation to click-through rates or if links are even clicked. So there might be a missing word in there. Maybe he's asking if anchor text usage in links relating to people clicking on those links or not. Maybe he's asking about, like, is Google looking at, do users actually click backlinks to get to your site? That's how I interpret that. But Paul, feel free to interpret that and answer however you would like.
Yeah, I mean, I think let's look at it from the user perspective, and let's extrapolate that a little bit, because a lot of what Google is trying to do is replicate what a user might do. So in terms of if I'm a user and I'm like looking at a blog post, for instance, and there's a bunch of links on that blog post, whether or not I'll click on it, something I've seen in terms of just like referral traffic is, like something like using specific words and the position of that word in the sentence. Also the number of surrounding links are all things that affect the click-through rate in terms of referral traffic.
Yeah, that's one thing I advise all the time. And maybe this goes back to educating companies and writers and people doing PRs. Like, don't just get the link, don't just have the link there, but actually make it a call to action, right? Like, get people to actually want to click on it. I think that's really good advice. So we're going to put a little bow on this ranking factors thing, but one little thing I thought we'd chat about here is, like, to me, doing these ranking factor studies, they can be a little problematic because it's almost like if you're not asking the right questions or posing the right hypothetical factors to begin with, you're going to get a skewed study. Like in many ranking studies, this is just singling out SEMrush. I love SEMrush. In fact, I remember being on the Moz's ranking factor study 3-4 years ago, and I was like reading some of the questions they were asking about factors, and I was like, are you kidding me? Like, they're actually seeing if this is a factor. For example, the SEMrush study and many other studies don't mention like brand search volume or site architecture or community. I know Google has mentioned like they might actually look to see if there's signs of community around your brand across the web. And so that to me can be problematic. So I want to urge all the listeners when they're hearing about ranking factors, these studies, is that they're only weighting the factors they've put in the study to begin with. So I think there's something to be said for that. But Paul, I want to ask you, are there any ranking factors or considerations we should be thinking about heading into 2008 that we didn't cover, that these ranking factors don't cover, the studies don't cover? I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah. And, part of the reason why they're measuring certain metrics is because other metrics are just very, very difficult to measure.
Right.
We don't have that database that Google has. And we don't have the way they break it down. We don't really know what other than like some random patents that may or may not be used in our interpretation of those patents. We don't really know what's going into them. So we're making a lot of guesses, and we're doing what we can with the data that we have. So in terms of things, I'd be very curious to look at some more using modern natural language processing techniques to sort of break down things topically. and see what role that could have.
I agree. I mean, one thing I'm advocating a lot and trying to work on with all my clients now is building topical hubs. I mean, I think this is something that's been around for quite a while, but the challenge there is they're actually hard to put into practice, right? If you go to a client and you're like, we have these 20 pages, we want you to create content, it's going to be the ultimate resource on this topic. That's an overwhelming task, and very often clients can't accomplish that. But I think that's the advantage for clients that can. So is that what you mean a little bit about topical linking?
Yeah, I mean, I meant it in a little bit more of a broader sense, but that's certainly in lines of what I was discussing.
Yeah, I think the topical relevance is a huge thing, and that's something that's hard. Like, it's
extremely hard.
Yeah, it's not easy, but it's doable for a company like Moz or Majestic to come up with a link metric that tries to simulate page rank, because that's a little more black and white in some ways. But these topical things seems what's really difficult to measure unless you're Google.
Yeah. You also can't look at any of these things in isolation from one another.
Right.
Like most Google's using all these things at once. So when you look at it on an individual level, it may be one metric plus another metric is really a larger driver,
right,
rather than on an individual to individual basis.
Yeah, I often compare studying SEO, technical SEO, and ranking factors and understanding algorithms to like audio engineering. As we record this podcast, I'm staring at my audio program, and you're thinking about like when you're setting up an audio engineering environment, all of the settings interact with one another. If you change the EQ in one spot or the compressor in one spot, that affects like the entire sound of the recording. So I think, Paul, what you said is very important. It's important to think holistically in how the whole system can work together and how one factor can influence another factor. And it's not just things working in isolation. It's really critical to think of things like that. So, all right, let's just jump real quick. I wanted to ask you what rank tracking tool or tools you use when working with these big clients.
Yeah. Catalyst uses Stat. That's our primary rank tracking service. We also leverage SEMrush data for certain applications. On a personal basis, sometimes for a one-off, I'll use a SERP which has like a free rank tracking service. That's pretty good for the price. Can't beat it.
Excellent. I'll link to all those in the show notes. I like to ask, and I know the listeners are always curious what the best rank tracking tools are out there. There's a lot to choose from. Let's talk for just a minute about your content and your speaking. You touched a little bit earlier at the beginning of this episode about your process for keeping track of ideas. I'll link to that. You have a screenshot from your AMA on Inbound with that Trello board. But what I want to ask as a follow-up to that is like, I noticed on your LinkedIn, you have experience, you did some filming and editing a video for SiriusXM. So I'm curious, like, how important is it to be a content creator yourself as an SEO? Like in terms of understanding how SEO and content can work together, or even beyond that, working with the actual content teams at your clients' companies?
Dan, you went all the way back to my college internship. But yes, to address your question, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily important per se. Like, you can certainly do SEO and do SEO effectively without that under your belt. But what that does do for you, and this is more than just content creating, is it gives you sort of something to play around with outside of your clients. So you might have an idea and you can't always, apply that to every client. So it gives you sort of this sort of a platform to play with some ideas and to experiment with. And in a sense, it is also marketing. So you're giving yourself the ability to market yourself, it's part of the job description.
That's true. It can have a lot of nice secondary benefits. In line with content, Thomas, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name, Thomas, I'm sorry, at TEHFKE on Twitter. He wants to know, Paul, why are you so generous in sharing all of your content for free?
I think what he's referring to is I put together this technical SEO conference just last week, or I don't know when this is airing exactly. Let's say recently, and called TechSEOBoost, and we gave it away for free. The event was free to a limited number of people. It was sort of a small space, and we live streamed the rest, and the recordings are all up for anyone who wants to see them. And sort of part of the logic there was, one, it widens the exposure of the event, but two, sort of the event was founded on this basis of there not really being a technical SEO conference, a conference devoted to specifically technical SEO. So it was really like a community-driven effort. This was something that I personally wanted to see, and I wanted the community to be able to experience as well. So giving back.
I love that. And I think you've really hit upon something there, because as I was saying earlier, like SEO is almost too broad now. Like I feel like even myself saying I have an SEO podcast is too vague in a way. Whereas if I said I have a technical SEO podcast, I feel like that's what a lot of the buzz around your conference was all about, is like people are craving these more specialty niches within SEO. And so for anyone out there, if you're, trying to break out in SEO or run an event or post content, do a podcast, going into a niche, I think is a great strategy now with SEO. It's such a huge topic. So segueing from the conference into another community thing that you help participate in, which is the Reddit big SEO community that you mentioned earlier. I want to ask something specifically about this and kind of tie it back into maybe the listeners have experience with trying to moderate comments on their blog posts. I know a lot of people are shutting off blog posts. They don't like when they get negative comments, etc. I noticed that the AMA with Rand had a lot of trolling. It comes with the territory with Reddit, right? But with that being what it is, how do you deal with that? How do you decide when to block people, when to ban people? How do you moderate? And what's the difference between just someone asking a challenging question versus just really being aggressive and hostile?
Yeah, I mean, that's on I think a community by community basis. In the case of big SEO, it is a community within a community. So big SEO is its own community, and Reddit is its own community. Mm-hmm. So in the context of Reddit tends to be a little bit more hostile. Reddit doesn't like marketing, but big SEO is about marketing. And big SEO in general, there's a good number of black hat SEOs and people who may be less fond of a big white hat brand like Moz. Right. So that's something to be expected. And I don't want to necessarily isolate people because they're all doing their own thing. There's nothing wrong with what they're doing individually. But I don't want to see hate. Basically, I don't want anyone to get hurt. I don't want to propagate hate. So I'm seriously moderating bare bones. If any of those things come up, if anyone's hurting anyone's acting maliciously, anyone's attacking anyone on a personal level, we keep it really professional. And with, that's within my own discretion, and there are other moderators as well. So they may make a slightly different decision than I do. It's just sort of, you want to sort of balance that free speech, but you don't want anyone to get hurt.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance for sure. And what is Online Geniuses?
Online Geniuses is a very large Slack community at this point that I was very early in with a bunch of other guys. It's still active today. To be completely honest, I've dialed down my involvement with that, but I do pop in there from time to time and help out with some things. But it's this really, really great community built upon Slack. They do their own AMAs. It's not just SEO specific. It's all sorts of facets of internet marketing and UX and development. And it's a fantastic community in itself.
If somebody wants to join and participate, do you need an invite? Do you just ask? Like, can somebody check that out?
unless they've changed it recently, you just go to onlinegeniuses.com and you should be able to apply.
Okay. So go to onlinegeniuses.com and check out the Slack group. A couple little last questions here around coding. For someone like me, or maybe some of the listeners, like I know a little bit of PHP, I know a little bit of SQL. I mentioned I built those e-commerce websites. I mean, they were held together with duct tape, right? But I did it. They worked. You could pay, with money on them. But the point being is I'm not like a coder. I'm not a programmer. But let's say I wanted to kind of learn maybe the next thing that I can apply to SEO or marketing. What should I learn? Where do I go? What would you recommend?
So we're very fortunate nowadays. There's a lot of resources if you want to learn programming or really anything. I remember I started programming when I was in elementary school, just out of an interest of mine. And I was going to the library, picking out books that weren't necessarily very easy for like a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old to read. And now there's so much more available, especially if you're younger or older or you want to learn about programming. So Code Academy is a very obvious place to start. It's that interactive way of learning programming that I think is very, very effective, and it's free for the most part. They do have a premium option. Mm-hmm. If you belong to your local public library, most public libraries have lynda.com as a free resource that goes along with your membership. And that has a wealth of programming classes that you can take if you have a subscription. Mm-hmm. I think those are excellent places to start.
And for somebody in the SEO world, marketing world, what should we learn? Should we learn JavaScript, or like what kind of language or platform might you recommend there?
Yeah, I do want to say that a lot of programming is a logic. There's a logic to it. And once you learn that logic, it's very much easier to move from language to language. And there's not 100%, but you could pick up other programming languages much easier once you have a good foundation in one. For data analysis, I think Python is probably what I would recommend. Mm-hmm. You could also run R if you're getting really, really heavy into statistics. Mm-hmm. But if you want something a little bit more robust than R, I definitely recommend Python, and there's plenty of other applications of that as well. You can use it for web development and whatnot. If you're really heavy into, web design and front end development, then I think JavaScript is probably a must learn nowadays.
Yeah.
And JavaScript's really complicated nowadays. This is something I've had many conversations with people. It feels really, really fragmented if you want to start learning JavaScript. You have all these different JavaScript frameworks like React and Angular and Vue.js. And what I advise people to do is start with vanilla JavaScript. That's just plain old JavaScript. That'll be applicable to all of these. If you want to start learning those later on, you can also apply to things like Node.js, which is the back-end programming language for JavaScript. And then the platform you use after that, it doesn't matter as much. React's really popular right now, so that might make a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. But don't worry about that.
Yeah, because you're saying just learn, and like the underlying concepts of programming are going to transfer.
Right.
Even though the language might be different. One more question. It's from Twitter. It's from Zoran. I'm not going to pronounce this either. ZORANJOZIC on Twitter. He wants to know, how could one find a technical SEO mentor?
Yeah, that's a cool question. I think just like finding a mentor, that's not necessarily easy. People aren't necessarily receptive to mentorship. People are really busy.
Right.
But there's a lot of great people online. I'm a big Twitter user. Dan, I know you're a big Twitter user. There's a lot of really helpful people out there on Twitter. Yep. So start following some of those guys, ask really, really insightful questions, be their buddy and, start learning that way.
Start a podcast. Then you can interview people and ask them whatever you want. But no, and I can answer this too, because Sujan Patel was kind of my business mentor for a little while. Real quick, how that came about is I was just like on Twitter, John Doherty tweeted something. It was a post about Sujan writing about how he stepped down from his company. I read it. I left a comment. I said, one of my goals in the next year was to find a mentor, because he asked us to tell us what our goals were. One thing led to another. So the punchline there is just let it happen organically too. You don't have to force it. Just put it out there in the world. And then 2 is the mentor doesn't have to be this official thing. You can have dozens of mentors that maybe you tweet at once a month, or that you email with a few times. So like, Marie Haynes has given me advice. AJ Cohn has given me advice. I definitely informally have mentors out there in the broader sense. So I would think of it that way as well. It doesn't have to be this official arrangement either. It can be something that's casual and happens every once in a while. So Paul, this has been a fantastic discussion. As we kind of wrap things up here, I think the theme of this whole episode, as it's been revealing itself, is really all about learning, at least for me anyways, and maybe the listeners. It's really been about learning and constantly trying to improve your skills. So I'm going to leave things and ask you, Paul, what do you do to try to keep improving your SEO skills and growing your knowledge?
Yep. Assume nothing and challenge everything. So that's constantly thinking about things in new ways and attesting those assumptions.
Now, those are mindsets, like in a practical sense, when you're sitting down in your day-to-day, and I find this happens to me all the time, is I'm buried in client work. I thought of a great new idea, like on the way to the office, but I get there, open my email. By the time all this information comes in, I've forgotten all my ideas. So do you have a tangible way that you go about doing that?
Yep. I mean, we talked about this in the beginning. I think the first step is writing down those ideas. That way you can return to them later when you have a little bit more free time and have time to explore those. I'm a big fan of carving out, doing the 80-20 sort of approach and carving out that 20% for testing those ideas out. Just make that part of what you do. It benefits you in the long run.
When you write, do you literally have like a pen and paper, or do you do everything digitally?
Oh, my penmanship is so bad. I would never touch a pen and paper. I am very much a digital guy, and I type everything.
You wouldn't be able to read it later.
Nope.
Awesome, Paul. Tell the listeners everywhere that you would like them to find you online, and even if you're going to be out there in the real world at any conferences coming up in the near future.
Yep. So you can check me out on my blog. That's searchwilderness.com. You can find me on Twitter. My Twitter username is Fighto, FightO. And the next conference I'm speaking at is Engage in Portland.
And are you going to do the SEO conference next year?
That's the plan. We're certainly going to have it as long as people want to come, and I think they do.
Well, Paul, if you include me, you've got one audience member thus far. So
you got it, Dan.
I hope to make it next year, as we're neighbors. I'm so close to you, right near Boston.
Yep.
Awesome, Paul. Well, thanks so much. Fading up the music here. And thanks everyone for listening to this episode of Experts on the Wire. We'll see you next time. Thanks.